Welcome to the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for being with us. Gun violence tends to surge during the summer months, and though gun violence in Cleveland dropped by 24% from 2023 to 2024, the city's latest available data still shows that children are most at risk to die in incidents involving guns. Firearms have been the leading cause of death in teens and children nationwide since 2020. Many major cities around Northeast Ohio are actively investing in reducing gun violence. Cleveland developed its 2026 Summer Safety Plan, which includes citizen outreach, violence interruption programs, and street repairs. Last year, Akron Mayor Shamus Malik said its violence intervention and prevention and strategic plan helped to reduce gun violence through programs like the Akron Street Team, which engages with people considered at high risk of engaging in future violence. And just recently, the Cleveland Public Library teamed up with the Cuyahoga County Office of Violence Prevention and other community partners. The goal is to provide gun safes and locks to promote gun safety practices. Even so, some think more needs to be done. After a tragic shooting on Cleveland's west side killed 3 people last weekend, City Council member Mike Polensek is calling for a show of force from law enforcement. Today we'll be talking about what's needed to make Northeast Ohio neighborhoods safer from gun violence this summer. Joining me in studio, we have Dr. Daniel Flannery, professor at Case Western Reserve University and the director of the Begun Center for Violence Prevention Research and Education. Daniel, thanks for being with us.
Good morning.
Also with us, we have Maisha Watkins, administrator for Cuyahoga County Office of Violence Prevention. Maisha, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Also with us in studio, we have Euphrencia Lash, president of 100 Black Men of Akron. This is a group dedicated to improving the quality of life within the Black community and empowering African American youth. Euphrencia, thanks for being here.
Good morning and thank you.
If you want to be a part of this conversation, you can give us a call at 866-578-0903. You can also send us an email at soi@ideastream.org, or you can message us on Instagram. We're at The Sound of Ideas. Now, Daniel, research shows that violent crime tends to surge, specifically gun violence, during the summer. What's the reason for that?
There are several things that are going on. First of all, more people are outside and they're congregating in larger groups when the weather warms up. That's one piece of it. You have a lot of young people who aren't in school anymore in the summer months, and so there's a lot of more unsupervised kinds of activities and unstructured time. And then there's actually some evidence to suggest when things get really warm and hot that people become more irritable, and so conflicts can escalate into violence, especially when many individuals in those interactions are carrying a weapon.
Well, as we think about that, let's kind of learn about some of the programs that are happening here around our area that are meant to tamper down or have the opposite effect of those things that you just mentioned there, Daniel. So, Euphrencia, we spoke with you last year after Akron had several shootings over the summer where young people lost their lives. Tell us about the work that you do with 100 Black Men of Akron and how it addresses violence in communities.
Well, we actually have a group of dedicated men who come together pretty much on every other week, and we work with young men, and we through our Leadership Academy. And we mentor them, we spend time with them, break bread with them, just to let them know that they are cared for and that they have a greater purpose in life. And we feel like engaging with them on that level, to a degree, shows them that they too have hope in life and that they have purpose and a sense of direction. And that's what we're there to do. We're committed to that. And we're committed to our core mission, which is mentoring. And we feel as though mentoring is a tool that can assist us in achieving that goal.
The young people that you're working with the organization, are they aware that there's a problem? Are they aware that they're at risk? Or is this something that you're kind of trying to get into their psyche before they even become aware of the issue?
I think young people today are very keenly aware of what's going on in society. They see it through our media. They hear it in the music. They see and hear it in school. So they're aware of what's going on. These are very intelligent young men and women, and they see it on a daily basis, and I think that many of them are trying to navigate as best they can, because some of them come from situations at home that are not positive, and some of them are actively seeking positive pathways, and that's why we're there to provide that for them as best we can. Of course, we seek partnership with other community-based organizations, churches, community partners, civic organizations, because it's going to take a community, as they say, it takes a village, and we truly believe that. But yes, they are keenly aware of what risks are out there, and some of them are actively trying to escape that.
Having that buy-in from the young people is so important, and it's really wonderful to hear that they are actively seeking out ways to, stop this greater problem that they didn't create, but they have a hand in making it a better situation for everyone. So that's really
Absolutely.
nice to hear. Maisha, let's bring you into the conversation now. You were with the Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance for years before getting involved with the county and their violence prevention programs. How does the work that you do now continue your efforts to try to reduce gun violence in Cleveland?
I appreciate you asking that question because I think it go hand in hand with the community-based organization work that you do in Akron. But the work of Cleveland Peacemakers was also very much mentoring young people who are at the highest risk of shooting or being shot. Now, from community to county government, is really important to ensure that we are not trying to replace community, that community organizations are the most proximate to the people, and how do we help scale and amplify and invest in the work that they're already doing. And so it's really important organizations like Cleveland Peacemakers, New Era Cleveland, the People's Office, and other community-based organizations is not to replace, but to coordinate, collaborate, and invest in to help them scale to continue to reach the people who I once was able to support at Cleveland Peacemakers. So it's perfect alignment, but more coordination at a county government level.
Okay. Now, Daniel, we talked about firearms being a leading cause of death among children and teens. That's a trend since 2020. What is causing this? Are we talking about homicides? Are we talking about accidental deaths? Are we talking about people taking their own lives?
Well, I think it all comes into play, and I appreciate you mentioning the fact that there are accidental deaths and suicides and situations where people are under the influence or in a domestic violence situation and firearms are involved. Things often escalate to sometimes tragic outcomes. So, I think the effort here is to understand not just when a firearm is used in a fatality, but also to understand when firearms are being used in non-fatal situations and things like carjackings and shots into properties and other kinds of assaults, because these are the things that undergird our challenges with violence generally. And these are the chances of opportunity for us to intervene and provide education and awareness and support for individuals that are involved in gun violence before it gets to the point of being a victim of a homicide. So the collective nature of the work needs to continue. These are long-term efforts that need to be supported. There are no quick fixes here. You've heard the term many times, I'm sure. Law enforcement, can't arrest our way out of this situation. They're a piece of the puzzle, but the community partnerships and the things that Maisha and others are doing in the community are essential to support and maintain.
Do we have any insight, Dan, to follow up on this in why this has been a trend since 2020 with gun incidents being a leading cause of death among children and teens?
I think this is really a function of just the sheer availability of firearms and the fact that most young people now believe that they need to possess and carry a firearm for their own protection and safety. And then when particular interactions, conflicts, disagreements escalate, I think the attitude is, well, I have a gun, I think you have a gun, so I'm going to use mine before you use yours. And they do this sometimes impulsively. And I think that alone contributes to an uptick, let alone the lethality of the firearms that are now available out in our streets and in the community. So I think those things have come together at the same time to contribute significantly to the uptick in gun violence and injuries related to gun violence that we've seen.
I'm seeing nodding in agreement here from both Refrencia and Maisha. Anything you want to add on what Dan was saying there?
I would just add to, I know the focus is oftentimes on young people, but the average shooter is 27. And so talking about what is missed or what is needed, like having a captivated audience of young people now and talking about interventions and strategies. But if a 27-year-old is oftentimes the shooter, what are we missing as we're thinking about young people aging and a modelship that is occurring in our community when conflict happens? How are they seeing their older influencers handling conflict, and is it something that they're repeating?
Absolutely, I agree with both of my panelists. A lot of these young men and women, in some instances, they have, guns are readily accessible, and I think that this comes from, from systemic challenges, and I can't say exactly what the solution is, but I do know that we need to hold our community accountable and trying to find solutions to the gun violence issues in our community. We cannot let legislators off the hook. We can't let criminals off the hook. We have to hold all systems accountable to try to find viable solutions. I agree with you all entirely. This is a very serious issue in our community.
If you are just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we are talking about the serious issue of gun violence and the fact that it is one of the leading causes of deaths around the country for young people, for children and teens. If you want to be a part of this conversation, you can call us at 866-578-0903. You can also send us an email at soi@ideastream.org. You can also send us a note on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. We have people here from Northeast Ohio who are directly and actively involved in preventing gun violence from happening and also educating people on safety measures. So we'd be happy to take your questions and also any comments if you have an experience you would like to share. We have an email now in from Eliza. Eliza says, do most gun shootings happen within certain hours of the day or night? Might there be a particular hour when we should be most vigilant or proactive? That's a specific question. I'll ask you, Francia, do you have some thoughts on that?
I think in the times past, I think some of them happened more so at night. But in Akron, just last week, we had a homicide at 10 a.m. in the morning on a main thoroughfare, main street in our city. So I think you can't segment it to one particular time of the day. I think that people who are going to use violence, they're going to use it whenever they feel so, whenever they feel so inclined.
Maisha, I want to ask you about the downward trends that we've been seeing in gun violence in Cleveland. But as we mentioned just a moment ago, children and teens are still most at risk to die by incidents involving guns. That's according to city data. Can you talk more about that, the seeming conflict there?
Yeah, I think holistically thinking about the ecosystem of violence reduction is that it's literally going to take all of us, community-based organizations, county government, academia, law enforcement, all of us to get together to understand what's the common goal. And I think too often gun violence was also often siloed from a public health approach because oftentimes it was viewed as like a poverty-stricken issue or a Black and brown issue. And now with gun violence impacting all people, I think it allows for more conversation, more investment, more policies, more legislation, safe storage, different conversations that has nothing to do with your zip code or your neighborhood, but more so the safety of everyone, where you feel like there's no safe place, where grocery stores, libraries, homes, places of worships are being impacted by gun violence. It's just a more inclusive conversation that is happening at scale. And I think that alongside investment and policy, it's allowing people to understand that the public safety ecosystem is more than first responders and law enforcement, that it is 100 Black men, that it is research, because research around gun violence wasn't funded for a very long time. And now we had dollars that supported research around gun violence. And I think to the greater question is that gun violence, I know we oftentimes talk about summer months, but we also had very tragic winters and falls and spring at 8 a.m. and 6. And so like the conversation around a season, I think needs to shift because people are dying no matter the season, the date, or the time. And that's very concerning.
I think just to add, I agree with you 1,000%. I mean, it's around the clock, around the year. So you can't really segment it to a season, though the summer, I think, offers opportunity. But this takes place throughout the year and, around the clock. And I think that we need to be ever vigilant to try to combat this issue as best we can 12 months throughout the year.
We do want to talk about solutions here. So Maisha, I'm going to stay with you for this question here. Do you have any insight into what's been working in Cleveland since we have seen some of that gun violence dropping?
Yeah, I do want to give a shout out to the county exec, Chris Ronayne, for creating this Office of Violence Prevention. But as we think about the city of Cleveland, Mayor Bibb has the initiative Cleveland Thrive, and they've been doing amazing work bringing together over 90 plus community-based organizations that are focused on addressing the underlying issue of violence, creating a blueprint for peace, investing more in communities alongside the Cleveland Foundation, putting dollars and support into the city of Cleveland very intentionally with the 7 identified communities that are the most impacted by violence. So absolutely shout out to the mayor administration for focusing on that and the Cleveland Thrive initiative. But also law enforcement being more than willing to work alongside community-based organizations in ways that they have not. Having conversations at a government level about policy, like County Councilman Michael Hauser just introduced the Tamir Rice Act, which is banning hand-shaped gun lighters that businesses are selling in stores that are hand size. So if a young person gets access to this who does not have the access to a real firearm, it looks like a real gun. So going into places such as schools, stores, or anywhere else, it can pose as a threat for this young person or anybody to lose their life. So things that brings awareness and education, that invites people, call people into the conversation instead of calling them out, to allow them to understand that there may be something that you're doing that is a violence prevention strategy that you may not be aware of, but you're prolonging a life and creating a success measure for someone to be alive and free. So there are so many things that's working. I think it's important to educate the masses about what violence prevention is, what solutions are. Yes, it's blood measures of making sure that homicides are reducing and non-fatal shootings are being less, but it's also people graduating and job employment and retention and amazing mentors and pathways to education. I'm in research influencing those things. So it's so many efforts being done in Cuyahoga County in Northeast Ohio, but how do we create synergy to be on the same page? And I believe that's happening. And I'm excited about where we're heading.
Yeah,
Daniel?
there's an initiative by our former administrative judge in the Common Pleas Court, Brendan Sheehan, along with Administrative Judge O'Malley in the Juvenile Court, where they have a gun docket. So individuals that are convicted of felonies while carrying a firearm, but they didn't use the firearm to create injury or death, are eligible for a diversion program, which links them up to a peer supporter in the system and provides supportive services. And we actually have some evidence over the last couple of years that this can be a very effective way to reduce recidivism, particularly compared to what recidivism rates tend to look like without intervention and supportive services. So this is a fairly unique approach in the country, that a county court has taken this on as another mechanism in the criminal justice system, at least with folks that have already committed an offense. So we're moving beyond just education and awareness, and we're complementing what's going on in the community with our violence interrupters and our emergency departments to provide these services and supports before things escalate to a more serious problem.
Euphrancia, can you tell us a bit about what's happening in the neighborhoods that you're involved with in Akron that you think is working?
I think I agree with Maisha. I see a synergy and community organizations becoming more active and engaging with a lot of our young people, not just young people from 12 to 17, but they're actually going above that, 18 to 25 and even beyond that, for at-risk males who might be susceptible to this issue. So I'm very encouraged in what I'm seeing. It's not enough, but I do see movement in a positive direction, and I continue to encourage everyone who possibly can, all community organizations, to come out and to engage. No community organization is too small to lend a helping hand in this effort.
If you're just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we are talking about gun violence prevention and also gun safety measures, because there are a lot of guns out there. If you want to be a part of this conversation, the number is 866-578-0903. You can also send us an email at soi@ideastream.org, or you can send us a message on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. Let's talk about gun safety measures a little bit now, because we have talked about how many guns are actually out there. Maisha, the Cleveland Public Library started a gun locker program with a number of branches around the city. Can you tell us a bit about that program?
Yeah, it's really exciting. Shout out to our state representative, Brewer, who created the connection between the Cleveland Public Libraries, the Academy of Medicine, and then the Cuyahoga County Office of Violence Prevention. But in Cincinnati, they have this pilot program where libraries are and has always been safe spaces for everybody. And depending on your community, the library can be your recreation center, your food bank, your after school program. And having tragedy in Cuyahoga County where lives have been lost at or around libraries, it was just really important for that safety not to be lost in tragedy. And so working with Cleveland Public Library to identify 3 libraries that had data that gun violence was high at or around in that community, we provide lock boxes and gun locks to these libraries. It's going on for 3 months. And the Office of Violence Prevention will provide 3 programmatic pieces: a safe gun handling and storage program at each location, a community listen and learn session where we will invite in a city council person or other community stakeholders to share what efforts are being done, and then a community resource fair where the community organization that are the most proximate to the library to be able to come in and share what does it look like for them to work with young people or the community members who have been indirectly or directly impacted by the disease of violence, and how to involve them at a very community resident level of like, what can you do? And sometimes I remember my mom, every time I would bring a friend over, her strategy to violence prevention would be to offer a meal to all of my friends. And sometimes people forget about the simple things, that if a basic need is met, that reduces the chances that someone will either choose something bad or something worse. And so I know my mom doesn't think that she's a part of the violence prevention strategy, but sharing meals with community members is also one. I think another initiative, shout out to IdeaStream, is that we have the Living for Weed podcast, Keep Your Head Up. And that's an 11-episode podcast that talks about gun violence in our communities here in Northeast Ohio, including Akron, and listening to those who cause harm, those who survive gun violence. Judge Sheehan is also on there, but that's a great education and awareness tool that IdeaStream inserted themselves in to create something around it.
A shout out to moms. They play a critical role in our families and our communities. And shout out to my own mother who might be listening this morning. So,
I'd like to just give a particular shout out to the city of Akron, Mayor Shamus Malik, and Danico Buckley Knight, who we've worked together in the city to connect a program called Connect at the Rec. And that's an effort to bring young people in after hours, giving them a safe space to engage in recreational activity and other things that are productive. And that has, we've seen some great strides in that effort and area, and we're trying to create more of that in the city of Akron. So I'm very proud of that program.
To talk a bit more about this, we have a question from Jane. Jane emails in, it seems there is technology available for fingerprint locks on guns, like everything else in our lives. What is the state of this technology, and will this lessen the violence? Daniel, do you have any experience with this technology?
yeah, these are typically referred to as smart guns, where the technology exists where only the purchaser or approved user of the firearm can activate the firearm to work. So this is a technology that exists and is encouraged when there are situations with young children in the home, for example, and an individual has a firearm that's not securely stored. At least there would be the backup of the firearm would only operate for the individual who's sort of the registered user. Problems with that, right, or the challenges with that. It's expensive. It's not widely available. It's not required yet. So gun manufacturers don't do this as a requirement. And many gun owners will tell you, look, the reason I have a firearm available to me is for quick and easy access for self-defense if I need it. And so if I have to go through getting my firearm out of a locker or unlocking it, or then somebody else picks it up in the interest of self-defense, this technology is a problem. But yes, it does exist. It's getting better. It's getting cheaper, but it's not yet widely utilized.
We also have an email in now from Tom. Tom wants to know, how effective are gun buyback programs in reducing gun availability and gun violence? Maisha, you're shaking your head.
I think that all strategies should be considered. What I like to share is that oftentimes when someone buy a firearm or get a hold of a firearm, they're doing it to meet some unmet need. And sometimes these gun buyback programs will offer someone $25 for a firearm. And they're just like, that's not even enough to buy a meal if I'm utilizing this firearm to feed my family. So I think we have to be more intentional about what we're offering to the community. And also, gun buyback programs, although sometimes effective, the accessibility to firearms, if you get 500 off the street today, there'll be 500 more before you even have a chance to count them up and put them wherever these guns are. And so I think being intentional that if I really want to get a firearm off and support the person who's turning it in, that $25 is not enough to meet whatever need that the person, either fear-based or a basic need, conception, or like, so I think we just need to be more innovative and intentional to meet whatever need that this person thought the firearm was going to be used for.
Francia, do you have thoughts on that?
I agree with her. I personally have my own concerns with those programs. I think that we need to look to legislative remedies to combat some of these issues that we're seeing when you actually live in open carry states and gun-friendly areas. To me, that's problematic. So particularly for me in the area that I work in, I would love to see legislative remedies at both the state and federal level to assist us in this effort.
You mentioned gun-friendly areas. I want to bring up the conversation of rural communities now. Daniel, can you give us any insight into this? Any education that needs to particularly be targeted at rural communities where it's very common to see guns out in the open?
It's much more common for individuals to talk about being raised in a culture where guns are very common and used for hunting and other things. And so there's a lot of conversation about education and awareness at a young age of how to properly handle a firearm and use it appropriately. This really comes up too if you're a rural school in a community where first responders are not very close by. This whole conversation at the state level of arming teachers or allowing them to be armed. So the fact that Ohio is essentially a rural state in population, I think we need to be recognize that there are challenges and differences for individuals who are living in rural communities versus urban communities. Having said that, the caveat is gun violence happens everywhere. Schools in rural communities are not immune to these incidents, either interpersonal violence or mass shootings, but we need to be sensitive to the fact that there's a cultural issue here, there's a socialization issue, there's safety issues. It's a matter of getting to the point of what are the things that we can agree on so we don't go to our corners immediately when we talk about gun violence. Safe storage seems to be one of those things that folks on both sides of the issue can agree on. This isn't about your ability to own a firearm. It's about if you do own a firearm to be a responsible gun owner, particularly if you have young children in the home. So this is where we need to start thinking about what are the middle grounds and trying to seek those out in a more thoughtful and proactive way as opposed to just going to the extreme views of a yes or no, own a gun or don't own a gun, access to a firearm or not. So this is a thing, right? And I would agree with my colleague that, tell people to vote. Vote for the individuals at the state and federal level that you think will support evidence-based, thoughtful, reasonable firearm prevention legislation, policies, and practices.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to the locker program, the SAFE program for a second, Maisha. That was very popular, as I understand. So that might be wrapping up soon or may have wrapped up recently. Are there plans to continue that? Do you have any idea about that?
So our goal is to expand it throughout the county. In order to do this, resources and investment is needed. I think a lockbox, an average lockbox that's not too fancy, not with a fingerprint, but with the code, maybe like $20. Law enforcement has been a great partner in donating gun locks. Like when I first got into office, I have received 100 gun locks from law enforcement throughout the county, just donating them as a resource to the office. So as long as we have the resource, we're going to continue the program as long as we can with hopes to get buy-in from the mayors and managers throughout Cuyahoga County to support this initiative because libraries are a necessary part of our community, and it should continue to be safe in all spaces, including like physically safe. So I hope that it expands throughout our entire county.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like it certainly was very popular, so that sounds like that would be a great thing. We've got an email now in from Randy. Randy says, can you please address the issue regarding the Second Amendment, which many promote in regarding the use of guns? Thank you for the question, Randy. Something that hasn't come up here is the availability or the right, the constitutional right to own a gun. Is that anything that is on anybody's radar here as an issue? I'm not sure exactly what Randy's suggesting with the question, but I wanted to share it with the panel. Daniel, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, this is sort of what I was mentioning just a moment ago. It's we're not talking about an individual's right to bear arms. If you choose to own a firearm, and there are many kinds of firearms that people own now, from handguns to semi-automatic to AR-15 style weapons that are built to rapid fire. I mean, so these are people claim that they want to use these things for recreation or target practice or what have you. So what we need to do is to say, look, this isn't about your right to bear arms or not. If you choose to bear arms, how are you going to do that in a responsible way? Understanding that as long as we continue to have policies in place to make it easier to get a firearm, to own one, to conceal one, to carry one, and the technology of firearms continues to increase their lethality with the things that convert them into semi-automatic and automatic weapons, rapid fire, expanded magazines, ammunition that causes more significant damage than ever before. These things matter in terms of what we're talking about on the other end, which is when somebody chooses to use that firearm, significant damage occurs, and our trauma system can't keep up with individuals that are gunshot wound victims in the same way that 15 or 20 years ago, that played a critical role in reducing our homicide rates because people got better, more immediate trauma care. So the Second Amendment is certainly an issue here. And again, what I've suggested is we need to get back to the middle ground of this and not take the position that the Second Amendment isn't important and people don't have rights to bear arms. But if you choose to own a firearm and possess one, then we're trying to figure out ways to help encourage you to do that in a responsible fashion.
Maisha, did you have something to add to that?
No, I agree. I think sometimes the laws can make it more challenging for the work that we're trying to do at a communal level. Like even the right to open carry, and people travel with their firearms, and people who are causing harm in a community, like breaking into cars, know which places individuals can't carry a gun into, but may travel with for safety. And so how do we ensure safe storage inside vehicles where you lock your firearm up, make sure it's unloaded so that if someone chooses to break into your vehicle, that's not another illegal firearm on the street in the hands of someone who is either underage or should not have a firearm in the first place. To my colleague's point, I think people always just go to opposing ends, that when we're talking about safe storage and violence prevention strategies, we aren't saying that you should not, but we're saying we should all have the conversation about common sense gun laws, talk about safe storage and practices, hold upstream people accountable for the accessibility to firearms, but choose to own your firearm in the way that you choose to, but do it safely so that you can protect your family inside of the home and also the community around you. And I think that's the easiest way to put it, but you have the right to bear arms.
Mm-hmm. I want to bring the question back to where we live and the places that we live and our zip code. This is a conversation that does come up. I know we've talked about here how gun violence does not necessarily discriminate. It exists in all communities. But Francia, research does show that the biggest indicator of future is your zip code. Things like how long you'll live, how much money you'll make, they can be estimated by where you're born. How can we change the odds for people who are born into communities, Black men, Black women specifically, where the opportunities and privileges might make it easier or not as easy to succeed, rather?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've always believed that opportunity, when you have zip codes or individuals who are deprived of opportunity, you're going to have issues like this because people are looking to survive. And if you provide opportunity through job opportunities, economic opportunities, education opportunities, that you'll see some of these statistics decline. But if you deprive them, and we have statistical evidence that a lot of these zip codes in some of these areas are deprived of opportunity, you have a lot of these issues on the rise. So I'm always going to believe that economic and educational opportunities are tools to combat this. I will always believe that. So they need positive pathways in order to, they need to see that there is hope and that there is a future for them. And if they have a job, if they have access to education, I believe that we'll see a change.
I want to ask now about the policing aspect of this. Euphrancia, I'll start with you. Council member here in Cleveland, I know you're in Akron, but did say that we need to see a show of force from police. What role do you see police playing in making sure that we're preventing gun violence?
Well, I think that's appropriate at times, but the black community is both, and this is just my own opinion, at times we're over-policed and under-policed at the same time. I think that there are appropriate times for the police to engage, but I think for me, based on my own observation, that police need to show themselves in these communities, not just strictly as law enforcement, but as partners, as safety forces that are there for the community. I believe that that's their purpose, and when they need to show force, then they need to show force. I wholeheartedly support that. But at the same time, there are appropriate times when they need to show that they are there to partner with and be there for the community in those instances as well.
Maisha, what do you think about that?
I agree. I think that a law enforcement officer shared with me there's a difference between policing and law enforcement. That policing sometimes is having conversations, engaging with community members, being very communal. And then there's a part where you have to enforce the law. And those two things are different. And I don't know if it's always seen as a difference. When I was at Cleveland Peacemakers working at a communal level, there's a lot of distrust that community members have. And it's very important that if you are a mentor, that you are on the side of always saying that everybody has a role in violence prevention. One of the things is that law enforcement react. They come when something has happened. Community-based organizations are oftentimes there before and after things happen. And so that ecosystem of working well together, that law enforcement have their role, community-based organizations have their role, academia have their role, county government has their role, and we're all working together. And there's a model called Omaha 360 where law enforcement and community members have worked together traditionally for years and saw a 50% decrease in gun violence. And so thinking about models that work where no one's really trying to justify what or be defensive about what happened or what didn't happen, but what do we need to do to ensure that people are safe? And I think too often egos are in place, and it just drowns out the importance of holistically working together for an ecosystem.
Sure.
But
This is a conversation that we will certainly continue here on The Sound of Ideas. Thank you very much to our panel for participating today. Dr. Daniel Flannery, professor at Case Western Reserve University and director of the Begun Center for Violence Prevention Research and Education. Maisha Watkins, administrator for Cuyahoga County Office of Violence Prevention. And Euphrancia Lash, president of 100 Black Men of Akron. Thank you for the time.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.